Andrew, we heard from you that the nuclear industry has layers of oversight, from internal management to corporate management, independent peer review, regulation. Could you describe for us how this works and how they all fit together?
It's a bit like the layers of an onion. Right at the centre, you've got management accountability, underpinned by good training, good procedures, leadership standards, leadership expectations deployed in the field. Self-identification of issues, self-reporting and self-learning. So that's the innermost layer and actually the most important. In addition to that, as part of the internal system, there's an independent internal oversight on many of our aspects of our business, particularly safety management, who, as well as having a line report, is actually required to raise any serious concerns outside the line as necessary. Then we come into what I'll describe as functional overview, people looking across different operations and giving a critical appraisal. And then the final layer is external review, which consists of two elements. The first element is the independent regulator of safety, the Office of Nuclear Regulation, strong, independent, professional regulator. And then there's a worldwide association which we belong to, which conducts peer evaluations in depth every 3 years on each of our locations.
That sounds incredibly time-consuming.
It is, but what it brings to the business is an opportunity to learn. We don't see it as an exam that we have to pass. We see this as an opportunity for contributing to our continuous improvement program, and that's partly about the culture, because pervading all that, there has to be a culture of a desire to self-learn, a desire to critically appraise. And when somebody comes along and points out that something can be done better, the culture is, thank you for pointing that out, I'll incorporate that in my improvement plan.
You noted that the nuclear industry has a culture of open reporting of errors. How did this come about? And are there any characteristics that contribute to that culture that you think could be applied to the NHS?
Gosh, that's a big question. I think one aspect is leadership and leadership behaviour, and it's crucial that when concerns are raised, the way in which they are received will either encourage or completely finish off reporting. So that's the first aspect behind that. Underpinning the whole thing is actually the facility to have an effective whistleblowing organisation and structure. And again, what happens to people when they do that defines the organisation. But also, it's something which is hard won. It's something that is a bit like trust and respect. It takes years and years and years to build up, and you can lose it within 5 seconds by how you behave and how you respond. And we started off on this track by saying that this was a no-blame culture. And we then realised that that actually wasn't the case. Of course, if an individual behaves wherever they are in the organisation, including myself, in an inappropriate, knowing way, then there are consequences. At the other end of the spectrum, there are those things where it's what I describe as there but by the grace of God. Something has gone wrong, there are consequences, but actually the individual had no role to play. He was just unfortunately there, he was in the wrong place. And we've addressed all those issues, and we do segment them into, there is a range, but it isn't a no-blame culture. It's got to be what I would describe as a just consequences. It's got to be actually fair. It's got to be seen as fair.
It's important to differentiate between individual mistakes and system errors.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we do that regularly. We have things that go wrong on our organisations, and on the rare occasions people are put into the disciplinary process as a result of that, quite rightly, if it's an appropriate thing to do. At the other end of the spectrum, as I say, it's all about the process, it's all about the procedure. It may even be a training issue. You know, we, the organisation, have put the individual in a situation where he or she simply wasn't capable of actually executing the work. That's not the individual's fault. That's actually my fault.
We've had a lot of interest today about your process of peer review. How do you ensure that you get the right people with the right experience to undertake these roles?
Again, it's what I'd describe as practice what you preach. My observation would be that when we send people on peer evaluations, you have to send them off with a pre-job brief which says, this will be good for you. You will learn a hell of a lot, and when you come back, we want you to deploy your learning in the organisation. And then when you've done that, you actually have to do it. When you've said it, you do it. And that's what happens. People go away on these peer evaluations. They actually learn a hell of a lot. They grow a tremendous amount, and they actually then able to contribute to the organisation. One of my aspirations, which we haven't yet achieved, is to send our youngsters off on these peer evaluations early on in their careers. And it's something I wish I'd have done 40 years ago, which is to go to the best nuclear operating station in the world and have a look and be inspired by that. Come back with a real view, a real vision of what excellence looks like, and then carry with that through my career. And it's something I'd like to do for our youngsters.
Does peer review work where there's an element of competition between organisations?
Yeah, we see it internally. We operate 8 power stations, and we have league tables on many of our key performance indicators, and it is a driver. There is that element of competition, provided it's managed in an appropriate way, can be a very powerful driver for change. And again, it's back to the culture. Who's doing it well? Let me go and have a look. Let me see what they're doing, and then bring it back. And by the way, I'll improve on it so that I actually become number one, not them. So that goes on constantly within the industry, and it's a very positive driver. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew Spurr. It's been fascinating hearing your examples from the nuclear industry and your passion for your sector.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for letting me contribute.